and welcome to this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hennig. Today on the podcast, I'm going to give you a unique preview of the 2018 NBA Draft and get into breaking down my player comps for the different NBA prospects in this year's draft. We're also going to dive into the CW announces their fall 2018 season premiere lineup, what that means for the different DC Comics TV shows moving forward, as well as my perspective about baseball's attendance problem. Disney increases the offer for Fox studio assets, and we're going to cap off our six-pack with a very special top 10 list. My top 10 villains in comic book movie history, all the live-action movies, the DC and the Marvel Universe. I give you my top 10 list right here on the Mutant Blitz Podcast. So when I'm recording this podcast is the night before the NBA draft. So this is Wednesday. The NBA draft is tomorrow night. And instead of giving you just who's getting drafted at or all that kind of stuff, I want to give you my comparisons for different prospects. Because I think it's more fun at this point in time to kind of say who guys could end up being than as much as predicting where they're going to go. Because a lot of times when you're doing a mock draft, what happens is that you can't always factor in the trades. You can't always factor in teams moving up and down, guys being drafted higher or lower than they should have been. So you're more likely to be inaccurate with a mock draft than accurate. So instead of previewing the mock draft in terms of what teams are liking who and who could go where, I'm going to give you some of my player comparisons for who is in this draft. I think there's a lot of interesting talent in the draft, and I want to give you a unique perspective on that talent. So again, remember, this is not a preview of where I think guys are going to get drafted or how high or how low I think a player will be drafted. This is purely just my pro comparison for each player. The kind of player I think each guy could be at the professional level. Let's start with Slovenia star Luka Doncic. He's considered a combo guard, kind of a point guard, kind of a shooting guard. He's not really one or the other. He does have a high-level skill set and a good basketball intelligence, but he's not purely a point guard just based on he doesn't have the speed. He's 6'8" and 228, so his player comparison is Manu Ginobili. He's a guy who can be good at both ends of the floor, and he'll develop into a clutch player, a guy who can be a very good ball handler. He can be a playmaker. He does have an outside shot. I know a lot of people say that he's too slow, but I think we thought Ginobili was slow too when he came into the NBA, and he showed that he was very elusive. He was very shifty, and Manu Ginobili in his prime could easily put up 20 points a night. I don't know if Doncic is that kind of scorer on a night-to-night basis, but I think he could easily be a 16.7 assist type of guy at the NBA level, and he's going to be potentially getting a couple of triple-doubles in his career if he meets that potential. The player who's expected to be drafted number one overall in the NBA draft is DeAndre Ayton. I'll admit it, I'm not very high on him when it comes to his all-around game. I think that DeAndre Ayton is a byproduct of playing on a team that had a lot of talent. At Arizona, he didn't always get a chance to showcase himself as an individual. I think that he reminds me a little bit of Amari Stoudemire. He's got that kind of explosiveness around the rim. He can catch a lot of lobs. He can do some dunking. And he can shoot from about 10 feet out. But he definitely has shown a disinterest on the defensive end. He's more interested in grabbing rebounds and blocking shots. And not that Amari Stoudemire was a poor defensive player, not to say that at all. But Amari was not what you would consider a rim protector. And I think Ayton is actually slightly less of a defensive player than Amari was potentially. So I think Ayton could be an Amari Stoudemire prototype, which does work in today's game because he can run up and down the floor. He can shoot a little bit, but I think Ayton's going to struggle in two major areas. His defense is lacking, especially on pick-and-roll switches. He's not going to defend the rim that great. And his other problem is, in today's game, it's becoming more and more important to be an outside shooter to help spread the floor. And in a world where guys like Al Horford and Joel Embiid are shooting threes, the fact that Ayton is not an outside shooter yet does bother me some. And I think that the Amari Stoudemire issue is going to hover over him, because at the end of the day, Ayton does not have elite size. He does not have elite athleticism. He's really not elite at anything. So I do think that the way Ayton's game is going to translate is going to give him some problems at the NBA level, but he doesn't have the size or the skill set that makes him explosive. Marvin Bagley III from Duke, he's considered a combo of a forward/center. I think in today's league, he's probably going to play a lot more center than power forward, just because of the fact that in today's game, you don't have a lot of traditional centers anymore. I think Bagley has the potential to be a Chris Bosh type of player. Bagley is a double-double machine waiting to happen. The guy can easily get points and rebounds. That is not an issue for him at all. He has a high motor, and I like his motivation. At 6'11", he doesn't think he's a finished product. He doesn't think he's arrived. And he is currently mad that he might not be the number 1 overall pick. I think that even though he's not going to be an impactful guy when it comes to defending the rim, I think he's going to be such a major impact guy when it comes to energy, scoring, rebounding, and he can expand his range just like Chris Bosh did at the NBA level. I think that he can stretch out and become a very effective and good shooter from the outside while still being a very good rebounder as well. Trae Young is a very controversial prospect because he was such a dynamic player in college. He was so impressive at times that I think people took to heart the fact that this guy is the new breed of basketball. The run and gun, the high-paced offense, shooting from deep. And while people would say that he reminds them of Steph Curry, I think it's a horrible comparison. Because Steph Curry was always an elite shooter. Steph Curry was always, from the day he walked on the Davidson to his first game in the NBA to now, Steph Curry has always been an elite, high-caliber shooter. And I think comparing Trae Young to him is extremely inaccurate, because Trae Young's greatest strength is not his shooting. Trae Young's greatest strength is his short-term memory. He doesn't remember the 6 shots he missed. He remembers that he is open and he can take a shot offensively. He has to develop his passing a little bit better. He has to cut down the turnovers. So to me, I think his potential is actually much more comparable to Stephon Marbury. I think that Trae Young and Marbury are much more comparable. You have explosive athletes who have a knack for scoring, who can shoot from the outside, who can be traditional point guards, but are much better as explosive offensive weapons. When Starbury, they became to know Stephon Marbury as, was in his prime, when he was in places like, for example, Phoenix, he was so incredible at finding ways to fill up a stat sheet. And I think Trae Young is much more comparable to an explosive offensive weapon than a pure shooter. Trae Young is never going to be the shooter at a high level that Steph Curry is, but he can be a very, very good point guard at the NBA level. Mikal Bridges gets a very bad rap because he stayed in college for a couple of years. He's a 3-year college player coming to the NBA at 22, so he's not like the one and done. So I think that's hurting his reputation a little bit. But he is a 4-position defender. He has a great length, great athleticism. He's got a high basketball IQ. And I think that his work ethic and his intensity on the defensive end will always give him a job in the NBA. And he's also a 3-point shooter. Do not overlook his 3-point shooting ability. I think that the fact that he has gotten better every year in college and he does have high-level athleticism definitely makes him a guy who can develop into a consistent NBA starting player. I don't know if he'll ever be a star, but I think Mikal Bridges is a very good player. My player comp for him is Trevor Ariza. Very good defensive player, can guard all different types of guys, is an effective to high-level shooter from the outside, can be dangerous on both ends of the floor, and I think Bridges can be a similar player. I think Bridges is a guy that does not get enough credit because, again, he's not the sexy talent. He's not highly lauded coming into the college like Michael Porter Jr. was. He's not viewed the same way athletically that Andrew Wiggins is. But similar to Jimmy Butler, Mikal Bridges can build himself a reputation in the NBA. The reason why I don't think that he is going to be Jimmy Butler is because I don't think Bridges has the selfish gene in him. He's not a guy who's going to man the ball in his hands. He's not a guy who's going to say, give me the ball, I'm going to go score, like a Jimmy Butler developed himself into at the NBA level. I think he's much more like a Trevor Ariza. If you need him to get 25 points, he can do it on some nights. If you just need him to go out there and get 12 points and 4 steals, he can do that as well. If you just need him to sit in the corner and shoot threes and play defense, he can do that. He's a much more team-oriented guy than a Jimmy Butler is. Not that Jimmy Butler is a team-oriented guy, but Jimmy Butler is a much more assertive offensively, whereas Mikal Bridges is not as demonstrative of an offensive player. So I think that Trevor Ariza is a much better comp for him. Nobody really knows what Michael Porter Jr. is going to be. We don't even know if he's going to be healthy long enough for his NBA career. I think the biggest problem with Michael Porter Jr. is when you have back problems at high school and college and you have to have back surgery and then you have spasms that you have to cancel a workout, it gives off the perception that you have health problems. But assuming he's healthy and assuming he can live up to the expectations anointed on him, I think Michael Porter Jr. could be like a Bernard King, but with a three-point shot. Bernard King was a scoring machine with the Knicks in the 1980s, and I think that Michael Porter Jr. can be a similar weapon. I think Michael Porter Jr., when healthy, what I've seen of him in high school and the little bit that he played at Missouri, he showed that he has limitless scoring ability. He has limitless athleticism. But there's issues with his basketball IQ, there's issues with his maturity, and there's issues with his health. And I think that if he can iron out all the red flags, he could be an elite scorer like Bernard King was. Miles Bridges is another controversial player in the NBA draft. He's a guy that I think a lot of people are a little confused about what exactly his position is going to be. His size at 6'6" and just under 6'7" in sneakers does not allow him to be the kind of player that he was able to be in college. See, in college, he was more of a stretch four at times or a large wing player, whereas in the NBA, there's a lot of guys who are bigger than him, there's a lot of guys who are stronger and more athletic than he is. Miles Bridges, his descend from year one to year two in college definitely hurts what we project him to be at the NBA. He's not a guy who is great at any one thing. He has ability to play defense and offense at a high level, but the limitations in his consistency, the limitations in his ability to always get to the basket consistently, I think is something that is going to affect him for his entire career, because his size and his inconsistent play is going to limit his ceiling. The best comparison I have for him is Robert Horry. I think that he is a guy that Miles Bridges, he wants to be an impact on a team, but I don't know if he'll ever be able to find his way as an impact player. And even though he's a little shorter than Robert Horry, I think that in this league, in this stretch system that we have, his athleticism could allow him to be a very good defensive player. If he develops as a more consistent three-point shooter, he can carve out a role on a team as a guy who just does a little bit of everything. He's maybe also a little taller than P.J. Tucker, so I don't know if I want to compare him to Tucker either. But if Bridges puts in the work and the time, I think Miles Bridges can be a very good, grinded-out player. Like I said, Robert Horry, P.J. Tucker kind of guy who has an impact in the moments that you need him, but he's not a guy you depend on for scoring night in and night out. But he can have explosive moments because of the fact that at the end of the day, he is still such a pure athlete, but his size and his inconsistency is definitely going to hurt him and limit him at the next level. I was a huge fan of Colin Sexton at Alabama. I like the fact that this is a young man who went to Alabama, got coached by a former NBA point guard and NBA coach in Avery Johnson. Avery won an NBA title with the Spurs. He's a former NBA Coach of the Year. If anybody understands what it means to maximizing your ability, it's Avery Johnson. And I think Colin Sexton got the kind of mentorship that he's going to need to be an impactful player at the NBA level. I'm never going to confuse him with an elite defensive player, but he is a guy who is relentless, and I think that is the key word for him. He is a nonstop, relentless player. He does have a very good offensive game for a guy who's not getting a lot of recognition compared to certain other talents in this draft. Don't get it twisted. He is still a work in progress, but he's not a guy who's going to be a great playmaker. He's a good teammate. He's a valuable teammate, but he's a guy who more is a scorer than a passer. And that's why, to me, his ceiling in pro comparison is Gilbert Arenas. He is a guy who wants the ball in his hands. He wants to score. He wants to win the game for his teammates. He thinks that whenever the ball is in his hand, good things are going to happen. And like Gilbert Arenas, he has the physical stature that's not going to allow him to ever be a shooting guard because he's not tall enough. But he does have the physical tools to be an effective scoring point guard wherever team he goes to. I think that the fact that he can finish in traffic, he's unafraid, and he's basically an Energizer Bunny will allow him to be potentially a 15 to 20-point scorer in the NBA. So I think he's much more like Gilbert Arenas than anybody else at the pro level. A couple more NBA comparisons I want to give you. I first want to touch on two of the guys from Villanova. Part of the reason because I watched a lot of Villanova basketball in the last few years. I think Dante DiVincenzo has turned himself into a first-round pick because of his performance in the NCAA tournament, and also because he showed throughout the season his willingness to be part of the solution for Villanova and not the problem. And that's a big deal at the NBA level, if you're willing to be anything your team needs you to be. And that's why I think he is Brent Barry 2.0. He has the athleticism to be a slam dunk champion, just like Brent Barry was in 1996. He has the outside shooting ability to lead the NBA in three-point shooting, just like Brent Barry did. And he can be a key part of a championship-winning team, just like Brent Barry was with the Spurs. And I think, like Barry, he might bounce around the league a little bit, too. Barry played for a bunch of different teams. He played for the Heat and the Bulls and the Spurs and the Supersonics. And I think DiVincenzo is going to have the same problem. He's not always going to stick in the same place because not every coach is going to like his style of play or find a way to use him at times. But I think his elite athleticism and his three-point shooting is going to always find him a job in the NBA. Jalen Brunson is a guy who's already physically able to come into the NBA, while a lot of guys like Mo Bamba and Michael Porter Jr., we have questions about their bodies and how they can handle the NBA. Jalen Brunson physically already looks like an NBA point guard. He can play very good defense. He's a clutch shooter. He's unafraid to take the ball to the basket. And he's unafraid to go out there and do the work it takes to be a very good basketball player. And I think a lot of people are underselling what he could become at the NBA level. So for me, when I look at his defense, when I look at his offense, when I look at all the different things that he can do, I think Jalen Brunson's ceiling is Mark Jackson. Now, I know that's controversial to some people because Mark Jackson is one of the top 5 assist men in all of NBA history. But people overlook the fact that how much of a floor general Jalen Brunson was in college, how he was an extension of his head coach. And I think that physicality that he already has and fearlessness coming into the NBA, he could be a Mark Jackson, a guy who's a floor general, who can dish out the assists, can get the steals on the defensive end, who's unafraid to go get the rebound. He has the mentality, he has the poker face to be an all-star caliber point guard in the NBA. I don't know if he'll ever be one of the 2 or 3 best point guards in the league, but he may develop into being one of the 5 or 10 best point guards year in and year out in the league. So I think his ceiling is much closer to a Mark Jackson than it is some of the other bizarro world comps that I've seen for him. I think people are just underselling him because, again, he's not a one and done. If you look at when different guys have dropped, whether it's CJ McCollum, whether it's Jeff Teague, whether it's other players who are more complete products coming into the league, like Jalen Brunson, teams are not drafting them on potential. They have to draft them on what they know the guy can be. So I think that Jalen Brunson can be a very effective and impactful player in the NBA. The final player comp I'm going to give you on this week's Mutant Blitz podcast is Gary Trent Jr., who went to Duke. You know, when I'm sitting there watching for Marvin Bagley, I always saw Gary Trent Jr. as a guy who I think that teams are going to overlook a little bit because he's on a team of other super talents. You know, when you're on a team with Bagley and Wendell Carter and all these different talented players, you know, Grayson Allen's getting a lot of headlines for good and bad with his play. I think that the NBA will overlook guys like that. So when I think of what Gary Trent Jr. can be, his outside shooting, his underrated defense, his underrated athleticism, I think he's the next CJ McCollum. He's the kind of guy that can come onto a team and just sneakily become an all-star caliber player who under the radar can be a guy who just gets buckets game in and game out. People underrate his athleticism, they underrate his shooting ability, and they underrate the impact he can have on the game of basketball. So when I think of Gary Trent Jr. and saw him at Duke, I saw a CJ McCollum, a guy who can score whenever you need him to. He's unafraid in the moment. He's able to get the job done whenever you need him. And I think that that's the kind of player CJ McCollum is, and I think that's the kind of player that Gary Trent Jr. can be. It's going to be interesting to see where all these guys get drafted because, as in with the NFL, you've heard me say before numerous times on the radio and on this podcast, if the coach doesn't put a player in a position to be successful, they're not going to have the type of success that they need. And sometimes their players are so hyper-dependent on going to the right situation. So for a lot of these players, the team they go to is going to have a major impact on the player they develop into. Topic number 2 in this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. So the CW has announced their fall 2018 season premiere lineup. And the significance of this is that, to me, the lineup is telling you a lot about how the CW views their programming future. Remember, some of the CW's highest rated television shows have been the superhero shows. In fact, the number one rated show on all of CW, whether it's in live viewing or in playback viewing, has been The Flash. The show Black Lightning had a massive debut first season and did very well also. So factoring in all of those things, it's interesting to see what the CW is doing in the fall with their programming lineup. They have paired The Flash and the Black Lightning together on Tuesday nights. This is CW putting their foot forward and saying that they want to take control of Tuesday night programming, and they want to capitalize on the fact that their two highest rated programs in the spring of 2018 was The Flash and was Black Lightning. So you pair them together, The Flash in his usual 8 o'clock slot, slap Black Lightning right after them at 9. What you do is you're basically saying we're taking control of this time slot. We're taking control of this night of the week with our two highest rated programs on the network. And of course, putting together two superhero shows is always a good lead-in as well. It gives something for people to look forward to each and every week. And again, if you're trying to take on the bigger networks, the ABCs, the NBCs, and the Foxes, what you do is you take and you give them your best punch. So this is CW's way of saying that starting October 9th of 2018, they want to own Tuesday night programming. It's not as good news for Supergirl. Supergirl has been bumped to Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Sunday has become the night where you just kind of have to find a place to put a program. Like, for example, when CSI Miami eventually got kicked to Sunday nights, just like NCIS Los Angeles has been kicked there by CBS now, it is basically the network saying, we know we have a bunch of diehards who still watch this program, and we're going to stick them on a night that's not going to hurt our inventory. It's not going to hurt our programming elsewhere during the week. So you kick Supergirl to Sunday. What you're basically saying is you're trying to appease the hardcore fans without messing with the rest of the lineup. And also putting on Sunday allows when you do a 4-show crossover. So when you bring in DC Legends of Tomorrow, Flash, Arrow, and Supergirl, it'll be Sunday through Tuesday, and it won't be Monday through Thursday like it had been. Remember, the original lineup on the CW this past year was Monday night Supergirl, Tuesday night Flash, Tuesday night was also DC Legends of Tomorrow, and then Thursday would be Arrow. So it was kind of stretched out over the week. Now you have this condensed into 3 days. And we're getting to where Arrow and DC Legends of Tomorrow, where that's going to be on Monday. So DC Legends of Tomorrow is going to take the 9 p.m. slot on Monday. Arrow is on Monday at 8 p.m. And I think that one of the reasons why you're putting these two shows on Monday is because there definitely is a connection between the two shows, with Sarah Lance originally appearing on the Arrow and the Arrow being the longest running of all of the DC comic book television shows. And also, the DC Legends of Tomorrow show has been kicked up a notch with the full-time addition of Matt Ryan's John Constantine character on the show. So I think that pairing Arrow with DC Legends of Tomorrow is a very good lead-in for DC, and I think that giving Arrow a new night of the week to be on is also going to help them. You could tell that they were not able to take a stranglehold of that Thursday night time slot, and I think that putting them on Monday may give them some new life in the ratings. Now, as I mentioned, putting Supergirl on Sunday is not a good sign for Supergirl, and we have seen more and more as we have gone along that the show has become less with great writing and more gimmicky, and at times a little preachy. The original purpose of Supergirl was supposed to be, and this is what the showrunners said when it first came out on CBS. They said that Supergirl was supposed to be a superhero show for women. Instead, it has become a gimmicky show that happens to have a bunch of women on it. The writing is not as good as a show like a Jessica Jones on Netflix. It's not even close. The depth of the characters, the substance of the characters, it's very gimmicky at times. And now that you're going to see lineup changes on the show for next season, you're going to see certain characters change roles, change how often they're on the show. I'm not sure what the overall plan is for the show long term. I think they're just trying to get through season 4 and see how it pans out. But there is a small hardcore fan base for it, and the problem at the end of the day with Supergirl is that for a show that's made for women, they've done a very poor job at appealing to their so-called female demographic. Now, Arrow has a whole different situation. The show's ratings were down a little bit this year overall, but Stephen Amell has built such a hardcore fan base that maybe moving it to a new night will help them regain numbers in the ratings. And like I said, with Matt Ryan's John Constantine inserted in the DC Legends of Tomorrow, it allows the show to take a new direction while bringing in a very popular character onto the show. So the CW shuffling their lineup. They stick Supergirl on the night. That's not going to lose them any viewers. It's probably going to gain them some viewers on the Sunday night. You have that go into the show Charmed. The idea is that on Sunday night you can gain viewers where they weren't there before. Monday night is going to be Arrow and DC Legends of Tomorrow. A very good pairing, I think, moving forward, especially with the type of characters we're going to have on the shows. Remember, Arrow will be debuting Batwoman in December, so we're going to get the Gotham aspect of the Arrowverse and DC Comics into the show. DC Legends of Tomorrow has John Constantine now. There's a whole new dynamic for that show. And then you have your two best shows in ratings, in terms of ratings, on Tuesday night. The Flash going right into Black Lightning. Their two best rating shows. The CW shuffling their lineup and telling you what they're thinking going forward. They put their best foot forward on Tuesday. They give shows like DC Legend of Tomorrow and Arrow a new night on Mondays to let them carry that night. And then they stick Supergirl on Sunday because they know it won't hurt them during the week, but they can get the hardcore fans to go to Sunday and not have to worry about losing ratings during the week. Topic number 3 on this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. I want to address the issue that was brought up recently in Fortune magazine and the Wall Street Journal, and that is about the precipitous drop of Major League Baseball attendance. Major League Baseball attendance right now is at its lowest average in 15 years, down 6.6% from this time last year and 8.6% overall, according to Stats LLC. This could be the first time since 2003 that the Major League Baseball season has an average attendance below 30,000. And I think a lot of people have theories why this is going on. We know that baseball is trying to address the issues of attendance, address issues in viewership. Obviously, baseball viewership has been going down in the last 8 years on television, and attendance overall has been an up and down issue throughout the league. Currently, baseball is on pace, if you go by current average ticket prices, to lose $355 million in ticket sales alone this season. That is a major drop for them, especially considering Major League Baseball is now firmly planted as the number 3 sport in North America. It is no longer one of the top 2 sports in terms of attendance or in terms of television dollars. So how does baseball deal with this problem? Well, I think baseball has a serious problem on their hands on a couple fronts. The first front is the fact that the game of baseball is viewed as boring. Baseball has to fix a image issue, which is the game is slow and it's boring. You go to an NBA game, you know you have 4 quarters, the game is going to be done in X number amount of time. The same thing with the NFL, the same thing typically with soccer, the same thing with the NHL. Baseball is not a timed sport. So as a result, it does not have the same expectation for a completion time as the other sports do. So how do you fix that? Well, I think there's a few ways baseball can fix it. Number one, you definitely need to institute a pitch clock. Similar to a shot clock in basketball, the pitcher has 20 seconds to get the ball to the plate, make the pitch. Also, don't let hitters out of the box just for any old reason. Baseball has a rule in place that is supposed to stop hitters from delaying in between pitches. They're supposed to keep the pace of the game moving anyway, so put the pitch clock in. It'll speed certain aspects of the game up. Another issue they can do is, with the time of the game, get rid of this ridiculousness with instant replay. There is no reason why instant replay should ever take more than a minute in any situation. I don't care if it's a fair or foul ball. I don't care if a manager is contesting whether a guy is safe or out at first base. The reality is that baseball needs to stop with the elongated instant replay. There should be somebody sitting in a central location who tells the umpires it's fair, it's foul, it's safe, it's out. No more of this. All right, well, they're still looking under the hood. We really don't know what's going on. That's got to be gotten rid of. Also, they got to engage the audience in the building a little more. There's way too many people at baseball games staring into their phones, playing on their devices. You got to get them more engaged in the game. Now with legalized sports betting, there's got to be a partnership baseball can develop with online gaming that allows people to be more interactively involved in the game as being played in front of them. If they're going to be staring into their phones anyway, you might as well have them engaged in the game in front of them instead of giving them reasons to look away. Like when the pitcher walks off the mound, grabs the rosin bag, talks to the second baseman, shakes off the catcher twice, and then violently throws a pitch a minute later. It's not good for the short attention span of the modern day fan. The other issue with sports, and I don't know if this is an issue that actually can be fixed in terms of baseball or any of the sports, is the fact that if you notice, the drop in attendance among many teams is also in relation to the fact that people are viewing the prices of these games not worth their time. Baseball used to be, and still in many ways is, the most economical of the sports. But there's got to be a way that these teams can lower the cost of attending a game. And I don't just mean straight tickets. I mean the cost of food, the cost of drinks, the cost of parking. There's got to be a way for baseball to not do what the NBA has done and what the NFL is on the verge of doing, which is outprice the hardcore fan base. The average baseball fan is not an upper class income person. Just like the average sports fan overall, whether it's football, hockey, basketball, or baseball, they are not upper middle class to upper class income. Typically, a lot of sports fans are working class or middle class income basis because this is their outlet. This is their way of getting away from the world. This is their entertainment. There's not as many rich people to go around, so there's not as many tickets to be sold to the rich. Economically, this is an economics issue. This is not a sports issue. So if you made baseball more economical, you will not become like the NBA, which has priced itself out of many working class fans' budgets and has appealed more to the middle and upper middle class financially. Baseball is still one of the last economical options out there, and if baseball keeps elevating the prices of concessions and of tickets, they're going to hurt their fan base. Just look what happened with the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons did the opposite in their new stadium. They lowered concessions from their previous stadium. They saw an increase in sales. Now the Baltimore Ravens are doing the same thing during this NFL season. They're going to lower their concession prices to see if that increases sales as well. If you see a consistent pattern with football, if these teams keep lowering these concessions and we keep seeing this uptick in sales, I think baseball should follow suit very quickly. Because if there's already a pattern now with the NFL showing that this can work, I think baseball would be smart to follow in suit, because it should not cost a family of four to go to a baseball game to get decent seats. I don't mean you got to get, right in the front on each side of the baselines. I mean outfield seats. 4 tickets are right now probably going to cost you $160 to $180. And then to buy the family some hot dogs at a game, let's say each kid gets a hot dog and each parent gets a hot dog. Okay, I'm again, family of 4, I'm only using this economics. You're talking about probably spending about $8 right there. So right now, you're already at $188, let's say. Let's assume the parking was $20. Now you're at $200. Now you're going to have to go get water for everybody. Well, the bottles of water, they're not very big. Let's say you got to buy 2 of them for everybody. Now you're crossing in the $20 again. So now you're at $220. And then you want to take the kids to one of those random games on the side because the kid gets bored watching the slow baseball game. He wants to do the fast pitch. He wants to do one of the games at the ballpark. Then maybe he's spending another $20. So at the end of the day, you could be walking away spending between $200 and $250 for a family of 4, and that's an inexpensive stadium. There's some stadiums that are much more expensive than a Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia. So for baseball, they got to find a way to stop outpricing their fan base. They got to find a way to bring the concessions and the parking pricing down, and they also got to make the pace of game speed up because they're losing fan bases. People look at baseball as boring, and people look at sports as not economical and not trendy. It's not fun. It's not an option for people who have a certain income level. You can't keep outpricing your fan base, and you got to bring the casual fan back by speeding up the game. Topic number 4 in this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. So Disney has countered the Comcast offer. Disney has stepped up in a big way to ensure that they are going to get the Fox deal done. And it looks like Fox is so happy with Disney increasing their offer that they are pushing the deal to the next level. They are going to get the official legal federal approvals. Bloomberg is reporting that Walt Disney Company's potential purchase of 21st Century Fox assets is about to pass antitrust approval from U.S. regulators. So it looks like Fox is so happy with the counteroffer that Disney made that this deal is going to get done very quickly. Now, just give a little timeline. Remember, when we first did the podcast, we spoke about how Disney's first bid was $51 billion in stock options. That was approved by Fox shareholders earlier this year. But then Comcast came in and topped that bid with a $60 billion in cash offer that they wanted to use to outdo Disney. Now Disney has countered with a $71 billion deal. This counter offer by Disney is a 50-50 split between cash and stock options that was quickly approved by the people at Fox as a superior option according to reports. insiders have speculated from Bloomberg and other business insiders that Comcast will not make a counter bid because they have been so extremely outdone by Disney. And remember, part of the reason why that Fox wants stock options as part of the bid is because of tax issues when it comes to these purchases. They want to deal with as little tax issues as possible, and that is important to them. The CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, came out and explained that one of the reasons why they are pushing to get this deal done is, quote, direct-to-customer distribution has actually become an even more compelling proposition in the 6 months since we announced the deal. Iger went on to say there has just been not only a tremendous amount of development in that space, but clearly the consumer is voting loudly. Now, remember, Iger's company Disney owns ESPN, and ESPN came out with the ESPN Plus platform. ESPN Plus has seen a very good return when it comes to people wanting to spend the $4.99 a month to get unlimited ESPN content on their devices. For Disney, they're looking at how well the ESPN Plus platform is done, and they're looking to use this Fox purchase when it comes to the direct-to-consumer distribution in terms of taking control of Hulu assets to help them launch their Disney app, which is going to be another direct-to-consumer distribution outlet. So you're going to have your sports, you're going to have your Disney, and then you're going to have a stake in Hulu as well. And remember, Disney is very hyper-focused on the movie aspect of this. It is very important for them to take control of the Marvel assets. Remember, it is Fox who has owned X-Men and the Fantastic Four since the turn of the century. So for Disney, who owns Marvel Studios, it is very important for them to keep the cash cow rolling. Marvel movies have become a multi-billion-dollar income source for Disney. They do not want to see that go by just because they couldn't bid enough money. The money that they're bidding at $71 billion, they will get back twofold thanks to acquiring X-Men and Fantastic Four rights from Fox. According to Forbes magazine, Avengers Infinity War has already topped the movie Titanic at the box office. So that means a superhero film and its 50th day of domestic release will pass one of the most famous box office hits, Titanic, in domestic gross income all time. The significance of passing Titanic in its 50th day means that this is a billion-dollar monster that you have making money. The Avengers Infinity War has already passed $2 billion worldwide. It is well on its way to becoming one of the highest grossing films at the box office all time. You think Disney wants to give up on that opportunity because they had to bid another $21 billion more? Of course not. They're going to look at this and say, we cannot lose the opportunity to get the X-Men and the Fantastic Four in the MCU, find a way to incorporate that makes sense for the fans, and capitalize on this train. Superhero movies are a billion-dollar business now. It is become one of the biggest box office draws and one of the biggest attention getters. You saw what happened with Star Wars. There's reports now that Star Wars is halting all production on any spin-off because of how poorly Solo did at the box office. Solo did well its first weekend, and they got kicked to the curb by Deadpool for 2 weeks. And Deadpool's not even a Disney property. That's owned by Fox. Fox is selling these assets for a reason, because they cannot sustain having all of these business ventures and spread so thin. While Comcast was very insistent on getting Hulu and very insistent on getting all those sports networks, Disney is going to take all of this under their umbrella and become more of a billion-dollar monster. And it looks like the legal hurdle is being cleared, and it looks like by 2020, 2021, we should start seeing the X-Men and the Fantastic Four under the MCU banner, which allows them to find a way to start incorporating those characters into the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe, which means more money for Disney, more money for Marvel, and more movies and character situations that the fans wanted all along. I made a list of the top 10 villains all time in comic book movie history. I kind of been working on this for about a month now, thinking it through, reanalyzing the list. But I kind of had to go with my gut on a lot of these picks, just because of the fact that you can't include everybody. It is a top 10 list. Someone has to be left out. So, honorable mentions. Tom Hardy as Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. He did a great job. I know it wasn't the classic Bane from the comics, but Tom Hardy owned the role and was great on the screen in that. Jack Nicholson as the Joker in Michael Keaton's Batman. Obviously, that is a very classic version of Joker, very popular with a lot of people. And Jack Nicholson did a good job at portraying, a little bit of crazy, a little bit of a gangster in that film. Speaking of Michael Keaton did a very good job as the Vulture in Spider-Man Homecoming. The main reason why he didn't make my top 10 list because I couldn't overlook the other people on the list, as well as the fact that Spider-Man Homecoming was a little hokey at times. It was a little gimmicky, and Keaton's character didn't get as much time on the screen as he should have for him to warrant a place on my list. Also, Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins. Liam Neeson arguably has turned himself into one of the best character actors in action movies in all of Hollywood. Did a great job in that film. Very underrated Brian Cox as William Stryker in X-Men 2. Not the classic William Stryker from the comics, but it was an interesting retelling, an interesting revision on the William Stryker character, and Brian Cox was very vindictive and very nasty on screen and did a very good job with the character. Final honorable mention goes to Kurt Russell as Ego, the Living Planet in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Again, it was a revision, it was a retelling of said character, but Kurt Russell did a very good job at playing the two-faced role as being vindictive and also seeming like he's a nice, caring individual, when in the end, he's bent on universal domination, and you can't let the bad guy get away with that, but he seemed nice enough at the beginning of the thing, right? So let's get into my list. My main 3 qualifications to make the top 10 of my best villains of all time is 1, did you own the character? Did the actor take the character and make it their own? My second and most important thing is, how is the character's presence? Did you forget about him? Were there moments where you were more focused on the hero instead of the villain? Or did the villain almost steal the movie away from the heroes? And number 3, were there moments where you almost sided with the villain? Were there moments the villain became such an impactful character that you almost found yourself rooting for the villain to win in the end? So, to me, those are my 3 major qualifications. So I'm going to go for 10 to 1. Here is my list of the top 10 villains in comic book movie history. I also limited this only to Marvel and DC movies. There's no inclusion of other variants. We're going to go with number 10, Kevin Bacon's Sebastian Shaw in X-Men First Class. Very underrated villain. Kevin Bacon did a great job at taking this character and making you want to hate the guy. Kevin Bacon had great on-screen presence. He was very vile, very nasty, very uncaring what anybody else thought, and he just made you want to hate him, and you were so glad when Eric Letcher's character, played by Michael Fassbender, killed him that you almost felt yourself rooting for Fassbender to become the villain and take Bacon's place, which he does in the X-Men movies. My number 9 has to go to William Dafoe's Norman Osborn, who became the Green Goblin. This became the standard for all other comic book villains for the next 18 years. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is still iconic to a lot of people out there, and William Dafoe did such an amazing job at playing the two sides of Norman Osborn. Peter Parker's mentor and the man supposed to be helping him and the father of his best friend. And on the flip side, the evil and the nasty Green Goblin bent on getting his way no matter what. And William Dafoe did such an amazing job owning the character, owning every time he's on the screen. You couldn't look away. And he became the standard for every other villain moving forward on the big screen. Number 8 has to go to Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. While a lot of people thought Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice was stupid and it had flaws in the script, Jesse Eisenberg is the best Lex Luthor we've ever seen in live action. I know a lot of people are biased to Gene Hackman's version of Lex Luthor from back in the day, but to be realistic, Jesse Eisenberg wasn't just accurate to the comics, but he made you question what was going on at times. You knew he was behind everything, and he made you keep watching. You weren't watching anymore for Batman and Superman at times. You were watching for Lex Luthor, and Jesse Eisenberg deserves all the credit in the world for that. Number 7 on this list, it's a recent one. It's Cate Blanchett's Hela in Thor Ragnarok. Cate Blanchett took control of this movie. It's supposed to be a Thor movie. It's supposed to be about Ragnarok. And what does it become? It becomes Hela versus the rest of the world. And that's because Cate Blanchett owns it. One of the most iconic scenes in that movie is when she's walking through Odin's vault. And she's basically every artifact in the vault, including saying that the Infinity Gauntlet, which was in the vault, was a fake. She was epic as Hela. She did better than I ever expected her to do, and she deserves a place on this list at number 7. Number 6 has to be arguably the most popular Marvel villain of all time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is Tom Hiddleston playing Loki, from Thor to Avengers to him showing up in Thor Dark World and also in Thor Ragnarok. Loki has become a fan favorite, and it's because Tom Hiddleston has embraced the god of mischief. He takes control of scenes. He makes you love him and hate him at the same time. And also, Loki is a formidable foe. He is crafty, he's manipulative, he's a backstabber, and there's a part of you that gets excited when you know that he's going to be in a movie now, because you look forward to knowing what he's going to do. And the small amount of time he was on the screen during Avengers Infinity War, it kind of redeemed him for all the other scummy things that he did along the way in the other Marvel movies. Number 5 was a character that I think a lot of people overlook of how good he was because of all the great Marvel movies that have come along since this movie. But of Marvel's Avengers Age of Ultron starred James Spader playing and voicing the character of the evil robot Ultron. James Spader's voice behind the character of Ultron put you on edge. It gave you goosebumps. He made you sympathetic with the character. You almost understood and sympathized with Ultron in his mission and his viewing of the world. He got you to the point where you knew the heroes were going to win, but you just weren't sure how they were going to get it done because Ultron seemed to have everything figured out. James Spader did an amazing job with that character, but it gets overlooked because there's been so many great Marvel movies since then that we forget how incredible Ultron was and how chilling those first trailers were with James Spader voicing Ultron, making you jump up and say, yes, I need to see this movie. Number 4 is another recent entry, Josh Brolin playing Thanos. It is a long-awaited character to show up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He made his first appearance in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. He was imposing, he was threatening, he was powerful, and he was large on the screen as well. And now you got to see him in his full power in Avengers Infinity War. You see how ruthless he is, you see how single-minded he is, and you see how dangerous that he is. And the fact that this is the first movie that the villain won instead of the hero gives him even more of a place on this list. Thanos' mission seemed to make sense, and that's what made the villain even more dangerous, is the fact that he was making sense. It's just the way he went about it was all wrong. And the fact that he never wanted to kill Gamora, it made him even more of a humanized character, despite the fact that he was bigger than everybody else, he was stronger than everybody else, and he was big and powerful enough to handle 6 Infinity Stones at the same time. Thanos belongs on this list, and Josh Brolin deserves in the top 5 just because of how he brought a massive character literally and figuratively to life on the big screen. Number 3, and barely at number 3 ahead of Thanos, has to go Michael B. Jordan as Eric Killmonger. Black Panther, because of all the action and all the themes in the movie, overlooked. People don't understand how well written that movie was, of how well put together Eric Killmonger was. Michael B. Jordan, Killmonger, may for a long time become more popular than Black Panther is because of that movie. And because of how successful Michael B. Jordan's character was, there are some rumors of him maybe appearing in a future movie somehow. Now, I don't know how you're going to do that because you killed the guy off at the end. But if he doesn't come back, I think Michael B. Jordan will forever go down as one of the best Marvel Cinematic Universe villains. You could sympathize with him. You understood where he was coming from. There's a part of you that almost wanted him to win. And then when you saw him take the throne, you realized how wrong and how he shouldn't be in that position. And while you were happy to see Black Panther win in the end, you were reluctant to see Michael B. Jordan go because he owned the screen. That scene when he walks into the throne room and takes his place as the Black Panther is a chilling moment to see how he owns that scene. Number 2 on this list can be considered an oldie but a goodie. He is another archetype, just like William Dafoe as Norman Osborn / Green Goblin was. Ian McKellen as Magneto was amazing. When we first saw him in the first X-Men movie, he stole the movie from Patrick Stewart. If anybody was born to play the character of Charles Xavier in Professor X, it was Patrick Stewart riding around in that chair. And every time Magneto was on the screen, you knew that how dangerous he was, how influential he was, and it was scary that he made sense. Ian owned that role, and he's owned it for over 15 years. Nothing against Michael Fassbender, but no one will ever top what Ian McKellen did with the Magneto character. It's going to be very hard for the Marvel Cinematic Universe to one-up that character. But for over a decade, Ian McKellen, the way he owned that role is similar to how Hugh Jackman owned the Wolverine role, how Robert Downey Jr. has owned the Tony Stark role, how actors who have played characters multiple times have done an amazing job. Ian embodied all of the positive and the negative of Magneto, all of the pain, all the suffering, all of the ups and downs, and he did it in a way that didn't exasperate you. There were times you would get exasperated with X-Men characters. He was not one of them. And finally, number 1 on the list, the best number 1 villain ever in a comic book movie is hands down Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight. He was the star of the movie in many ways, and his rationalization for everything made sense on a very disturbing and scary level. You found yourself questioning if Batman was in the right. You found yourself questioning if the Joker was actually the hero of the film at times. And you realized at the end that he was wrong all along, but he manipulated everyone and everything. Heath Ledger owned that role, and there will never be a better Joker to ever grace the screen than Heath Ledger's Joker. There could be some good ones. We know about Jack Nicklaus. I know Jared Leto has been very controversial. Some people think Mark Hamill of the cartoon comic book movies and TV shows is the best Joker, but they all come up short to Heath Ledger. When he has that scene early in the movie where he goes and talks to the mobsters, that is the scene that will carry on for many people, because him walking onto that set with all of those so-called tough guys and him sitting there clapping and dismissing the broker and saying the Batman will get him no matter where he goes, and then going on with his proposition for all the mobsters in the city, that is one of the greatest villain scenes of all comic book movie history. Thanks again for listening to the Mutant Blitz Podcast this week. If you liked this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe so you can catch the content each and every week as I bring you my thoughts on the comic book world as well as the sports world. And be sure to drop a comment in the section below with your thoughts if you like or disagree with my top 10 villains list, if what your thoughts are on Disney's acquisition of the Fox assets, going through the legal hurdles that needs to get done, or maybe if you think that there's a way that baseball can increase attendance that I didn't mention. You can drop it all in the comments section below, and I'll catch you next week as we bring you the Mutant Blitz Podcast each and every week right here on this YouTube channel with me, your host, Josh Hennig.